Welcome to True Betrayal Stories. Today we're not just telling a story, we're dissecting a masterclass in revenge. It begins in a paradise reserved for the world's elite, the turquoise waters and white sands of the Maldives. Here, tech billionaire Sebastian Croft celebrated his success, lavishing gifts on his beautiful, much younger mistress. He believed he was untouchable, the king of his own universe. But while he was sipping champagne at $10,000 a night, his pregnant wife, Catherine, wasn't at home crying. She was in a war room with her lawyers, preparing to detonate a bomb that would vaporize his world from 5,000 miles away. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's the story of how a titan of industry was brought to his knees by the one person he was foolish enough to underestimate. The sun over the Laviani Atoll in the Maldives was a relentless molten gold. It bled across the sky, setting the impossibly clear water on fire with hues of orange and pink from the deck of their overwater bungalow, Suite 7. The Iridium Spire Resort's most exclusive residence. Sebastian Croft watched the spectacle with the detached appreciation of a man who owned his view. At 42, he had the kind of rugged, curated handsomeness that wealth manufactures, a jawline sharpened by personal trainers, a tan deepened by choice and not by labor, and eyes that held the cool, predatory stillness of a boardroom shark. His companion, Chloe Summers, was 24, and possessed the kind of beauty that thrived under the lens of an iPhone camera. She was all high cheekbones, impossibly long lashes, and a lithe figure that was currently draped over a sun lounger, clad in a bikini, that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She held up her phone, angling it to capture her face, the sunset, and the half-empty flute of Dom Perignon in one perfectly curated shot. Hashtag living my best life, she murmured, her thumb tapping out the caption. Do you think I should add a heart emoji or a sparkle emoji, Seb? Sebastian didn't look away from the horizon. Use the sparkle, darling. It's more aspirational. He took a slow sip of his own champagne. The taste was crisp, expensive, and familiar. It was the taste of victory. His company, Innovatex, had just closed a deal that would catapult its valuation into the stratosphere. This trip wasn't just a hedonistic escape. It was a celebration, a monument to his own genius. He let his mind drift to his wife, Catherine. The thought was a fleeting, inconvenient cloud in his perfect sky. He pictured her back in their sterile, art-filled Manhattan penthouse, her body swollen with the child he'd wanted, or thought he'd wanted. She was 7 months pregnant. He'd told her this was a vital business retreat in Singapore. A lie, of course, but a necessary one. Catherine, with her old money sensibilities and quiet judgment, didn't understand the pressures he was under. She didn't understand his needs. Chloe, on the other hand, understood everything, or at least pretended to. She was simple, uncomplicated, and breathtakingly beautiful. She was a reward. The butler is bringing the caviar, Chloe said, pulling him from his thoughts. She'd put her phone down and was now looking at him, her blue eyes wide with adoration. It was a look he paid for in designer bags and 5-star vacations, and it was worth every penny. Excellent, he said, finally turning to her and offering a smile. And I've arranged for a private yacht tomorrow. We can go diving, find our own deserted island. Her face lit up. Oh, Seb, it's like a movie. It's better than a movie, darling, he corrected smoothly. It's my life. He felt a vibration from his own phone sitting on the glass table beside him. He glanced at the screen. It was a text from his COO, Richard. Deal announced. Market is reacting very positively. Forbes wants an exclusive. Call me. Sebastian smirked, feeling the familiar surge of power. He was invincible. The resort. The Iridium Spire was designed for absolute privacy. Each bungalow was an isolated world connected to the main island by a long, winding boardwalk. Staff were trained to be ghosts present when needed, invisible otherwise. So when a distinct firm knock echoed from the suite's solid teak door, it was an intrusion. It was a sound that didn't belong in paradise. Chloe sat up, pulling a silk robe around her shoulders. Were you expecting someone? No, Sebastian said, his brow furrowing in annoyance. He stood, his own robe hanging open, revealing a physique honed by years of disciplined effort. He strode to the door, ready to dismiss whoever had dared to disturb him. Standing there was the resort manager, a man named Mr. Harrison, looking profoundly uncomfortable. He was flanked by two stoic-looking Maldivian security guards. Harrison held a large, sealed document envelope, the kind used for sensitive international couriers. It was stiff, heavy, and official. Mr. Croft, the manager, began, his voice strained. My sincerest apologies for the disturbance. This just arrived for you via a chartered seaplane. The courier insisted it was of the utmost urgency and required confirmation of delivery directly to you. Sebastian's annoyance turned to curiosity, tinged with a slight unease. A chartered seaplane for a letter. He reached out and took the envelope. It was addressed to him, Mr. Sebastian Croft. The return address was a prestigious law firm in New York, Sterling, Abbott and Finch, Catherine's lawyers. But they handled his estate, planning his trusts. Why would they be sending him a package here? Thank you, Harrison, Sebastian said, his voice a little tighter than he intended. He closed the door, the click echoing in the sudden silence of the suite. What is it? Chloe asked, her voice a whisper. The mood had shifted. The golden hour light suddenly felt less warm, more exposing. Business, he said, dismissively, walking back towards the deck. He tore open the thick paper with his thumb. His heart began to beat a little faster. He told himself it was just a formality, a document to sign regarding the new influx of capital into the company. Perhaps Catherine had liaised with them on some detail. He slid the contents out. It wasn't one document, but a thick sheaf of papers held together by a large clip. The first page was stark, its title in bold, unforgiving letters. In the Supreme Court of the State of New York, County of New York, Catherine Ann Croft. Plaintiff against Sebastian Reed Croft. Defendant. Summons and verified complaint for divorce. Sebastian's breath caught in his throat. The air, thick with the scent of salt and plumeria, suddenly felt thin, unbreathable. He blinked, reading the words again. Divorce. The word seemed alien, impossible. He frantically flipped through the pages. Allegations, irreconcilable differences, cruel and inhuman treatment, adultery. But that wasn't the worst of it. Tucked behind the divorce petition was another even more terrifying document. Ex parte. Order to show cause for temporary restraining order and asset freeze. He scanned the legal jargon, his mind struggling to keep pace. Words and phrases leaped out at him. Dissipation of marital assets, fiduciary breach, extramarital affair, illicit use of corporate funds. And then the kill shot a detailed list of his personal bank accounts, brokerage accounts and holding companies. All of them. Hereby frozen pending further hearing. Attached to the back as Exhibit A was a collection of photographs. There he was kissing Chloe on a yacht in St. Bart's 3 months ago. There he was walking into a hotel in London with her 2 months ago. And there, in stunning high resolution, was a photo of them on this very deck, taken no more than a day ago. His blood ran cold. The setting sun no longer looked beautiful. It looked like the dying embers of his life. He looked up from the papers, his eyes finding Chloe's. The adoration was gone from her face, replaced by a dawning horror. The phone he'd left on the table began to buzz again. It wasn't Richard. The caller ID simply read, Catherine. He was 5,000 miles from home in a gilded cage with his mistress, and his wife had just checkmated him. The game wasn't over. It had just begun. While Sebastian Croft was staring at his life's demolition papers in the Maldives, Catherine Croft was sitting in a steel and glass boardroom on the 54th floor of a skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan. The view from this window was not of a turquoise sea, but of the relentless, pulsating heart of global finance. Below, yellow cabs moved like corpuscles through the city's arteries. Catherine, at 38, didn't look like a woman scorned. She looked like a general in her command center. Her pregnancy was not a vulnerability. It was armor. It lent her an air of serene, inviolable purpose. Dressed in a tailored navy maternity dress that was elegant and severe, she projected an aura of absolute control. Opposite her sat Ms. Diana Sterling, the senior partner of the law firm, whose name was currently making Sebastian's blood run cold. Diana was in her late 50s, with sharp grey eyes and a reputation for surgically dismantling the lives of arrogant men. The package was delivered and signed for at 08:17 your time, Diana said, looking at a notification on her tablet. The seaplane charter was an expensive touch, but a necessary one. It ensured a verifiable in-person delivery that he cannot claim to have missed. Good Catherine said, her voice calm and even. She took a sip of water. By now he'll be reading the asset freeze. What will his first move be? Panic, Diana stated without a hint of satisfaction. It was a simple diagnosis. He will call his primary lawyer, Bill Peterson. Bill is a good corporate attorney, but he's a lapdog, not a wolf. He will then try to move funds only to discover that our court order filed this morning has already been executed by every major financial institution in New York and Delaware. His corporate cards will be declined. His personal accounts will be firewalled. He will be, for all intents and purposes, financially paralyzed. Catherine nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the city below. People thought of her as the quiet wife, the elegant hostess, the good old family money spouse who provided Sebastian the social legitimacy his new tech money couldn't buy. They didn't know that her father hadn't just left her a fortune. He'd taught her how to protect it. He'd taught her that the real battles were won, not with emotion, but with intelligence, preparation, and overwhelming force. The discovery of the affair hadn't been a sudden gut-wrenching moment. There was no lipstick on his collar or a suspicious text message. It had been a quiet, cold dawning. 6 months ago, she'd been reviewing their joint finances, a habit her father had instilled in her, when she noticed a recurring consultancy payment from one of Sebastian's private holding companies. A monthly wire of $50,000 to a shell corporation named CS Global Media. It was sloppy, arrogant. Sebastian had gotten so comfortable in his deceit that he'd used their own money to pay his mistress. A simple investigation conducted by a discreet firm her father had used for decades revealed that CS Global Media was owned by one Chloe Summers, an Instagram model with a penchant for luxury travel. The investigators didn't just provide photos. They provided a full financial workup. They uncovered the gifts, the Cartier bracelet, the down payment on a Los Angeles condo, the leased Porsche. All paid for, not from his personal salary, but funneled through corporate expense accounts or shell companies, blurring the line between personal indulgence and business. Catherine hadn't cried. The pain was there, a cold, heavy stone in her chest, but it was quickly superseded by a crystalline rage. It wasn't just the betrayal of their marriage vows. It was the betrayal of their partnership. She had been there from the beginning of InnovateX, using her family's connections to secure his first round of seed funding. The prenuptial agreement he'd pushed so hard for was designed to protect his company, his creation. But she, at Diana's brilliant suggestion years ago, had insisted on a single, complex clause. The fiduciary duty clause. It stipulated that as CEO and majority shareholder of a company that constituted the bulk of the marital estate, Sebastian had a fiduciary duty to his spouse to act in the company's best interest. Any gross misuse of corporate assets for personal reasons, especially those that could bring the company into disrepute, would be considered a material breach. A breach that would void key sections of the prenup, opening the door for Catherine to claim a far larger share of the company itself. Sebastian had signed it without a second thought, his ego blinding him to the possibility that his quiet, supportive wife had just handed him a loaded gun. And for the last 6 months, she had watched him pull the trigger again and again. The media strategy is in place. Diana continued pulling Catherine from her thoughts. We have prepared a statement. It will be released to the Wall Street Journal and Page 6 simultaneously in 1 hour. We will control the narrative. We are not positioning you as the victim, Catherine. We are positioning you as the protector of the company's assets and its future, acting to remove a compromised executive. And the board? Catherine asked. I spoke with Arthur Vance this morning, Diana replied, naming the second largest shareholder and a man who had been a friend of Catherine's father. He was displeased to learn that company funds were being used to finance the CEO's romantic getaways. He is calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. Your petition, which includes evidence of financial impropriety, gives them all the justification they need to suspend Sebastian's duties immediately. Catherine finally allowed herself a small, grim smile. She had learned Sebastian's playbook by heart over the years. He used money and power to isolate and crush his rivals. He would cut them off from their resources, attack their reputation, and leave them with no ground to stand on. She was simply using his own tactics against him. He was trapped in a luxury resort with a woman who was now a liability, with no access to the billions he thought made him a king. He had a phone, but every lawyer he called would soon learn that his accounts were frozen. He was a general with no army. Her own phone buzzed. It was the call she'd been waiting for. She saw Sebastian's name flash on the screen. She let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then, with a steady hand, she declined the call. She looked at Diana. He's stranded in paradise. Let him burn. The first news alert hit the wires exactly 1 hour later. Forbes InnovateX CEO Sebastian Croft sued for divorce amidst allegations of corporate misconduct. Board calls emergency meeting. Page 6. Billionaire's beach betrayal. Tech. Mogul. Sebastian Croft served divorce papers in Maldives with Instagram. Model Mistress while pregnant wife cleans house in NYC. In the boardroom, Catherine Croft stood up and walked to the vast window. She placed a hand on her stomach, feeling the gentle kick of her unborn child. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for the legacy her child deserved, one free from the shadow of a man who believed rules were for other people. The city lights were beginning to glitter in the twilight, and for the first time in a long time, Catherine felt like she could see her future clearly. It was a future she was building herself on the ashes of the life she was systematically burning to the ground. The immediate aftermath of the document's arrival was a silent explosion. The air in Suite 7 thickened, charged with unspoken accusations, and the raw, ugly static of fear. Sebastian stood frozen, the papers trembling in his hand. The champagne on his palate had turned to acid. He saw the photographs, the cold black and white print of the legal text, and his entire world recalibrated into a nightmare. Seb, what is it? What does it say? Chloe's voice was high-pitched, laced with a panic that was starting to curdle her perfect features. He finally looked at her, but he didn't see the beautiful creature he'd desired. He saw a liability, a co-conspirator. Exhibit A. She knows, he rasped, his voice hoarse. Catherine. She knows everything. He threw the papers onto the glass table. They scattered a testament to his shattered life. Asset freeze. She froze everything. My accounts, the company, everything. Chloe scrambled off the lounger and picked up the first page, her eyes scanning the legal jargon. She didn't understand most of it, but she understood the words divorce, adultery, and her own name, Chloe Summers, mentioned explicitly in the complaint. Me. Why am I in this? She cried, her voice rising in hysteria. What does this mean for me? Sebastian let out a harsh, bitter laugh. For you. What does it mean for you? I'm ruined, and you're worried about yourself. He started pacing the deck like a caged animal, his mind racing, trying to find an escape route, a loophole. He grabbed his phone and stabbed at the screen, dialing his lawyer, Bill Peterson. The call went to voicemail. Bill, it's Sebastian. Call me immediately. It's a code red emergency. Catherine she's launched a full-scale attack. Call me. He hung up and immediately tried to access his private banking app. Access denied. Please contact your relationship manager. He tried his brokerage account. The same message. A cold sweat broke out on his brow. The paralysis was real. It was happening. How did she get these photos? Chloe whispered, staring at the picture of them on the deck. Who took this? Are we being watched? The paranoia hit Sebastian like a physical blow. He scanned the shimmering water, the distant bungalows, the empty boardwalk. The paradise that had felt so private and exclusive now felt like a panopticon. Every waiter, every cleaner, every smiling staff member was a potential spy. Had Catherine hired someone here? Was the resort in on it? His phone buzzed. Catherine. He had missed her call while trying his lawyer. He tried to call her back. The call was immediately rejected. Blocked. This is your fault, he snarled, turning on Chloe. The charm and affection he'd shown her just minutes before had vanished, replaced by pure, uncut venom. You and your damn Instagram. You had to post everything, didn't you? Tagging the locations, showing off the gifts. You led her right to us, my Instagram. She shrieked back, stung by the accusation. You're the one who's married. You're the one who told me she was practically living in a different world, that you two were just business partners. You told me she didn't care what you did. She didn't. Until you got sloppy. He roared, his face turning a blotchy red. The fight was ugly, vicious, and stripped of all pretense. The fantasy of their love affair evaporated under the harsh glare of consequence. For Sebastian, Chloe was no longer a beautiful escape. She was the face of his catastrophic miscalculation. For Chloe, Sebastian was no longer the powerful benefactor who could make her dreams come true. He was a cornered beast, and she was trapped in the cage with him. The resort manager, Mr. Harrison, knocked on the door again an hour later. This time, his face was a mask of polite, professional regret. "Mr. Croft," he said, avoiding eye contact. "I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news. There appears to be an issue with the credit card on file for your suite and associated expenses. It has been declined." Sebastian stared at him dumbfounded. It was the Innovate X corporate Amex, the Centurion card with no theoretical limit. "That's impossible. Run it again." "We have, sir." Several times Mr. Harrison said, his voice firm but quiet. "Our policy in such cases is that we must request an alternative form of payment to cover the outstanding balance." He slid a leather-bound bill folder through the partially open door. "The charges for the suite, the seaplane charter for your guest, the food and beverages, it is rather substantial." Sebastian felt a wave of humiliation so profound, it made him dizzy. He, Sebastian Croft, was being asked to settle a bill like a common tourist. He had no other cards that would work. He had a few $1,000s in cash in his wallet, barely enough to cover a single night in this gilded hell. The news broke online shortly after. Chloe saw it first, her phone lighting up with notifications from her friends. Her face went pale. "Seb, look at this." She showed him her phone. It was a Page 6 article. The headline was brutal. The details were worse. It painted a picture of a deceitful, cheating husband and a calculating, gold-digging mistress. It mentioned her by name, her Instagram handle, and even speculated about the value of the gifts he'd given her. Her carefully constructed online persona was being torched in real time. The comments section was a cesspool of vitriol aimed directly at her. Sebastian snatched the phone and read the Forbes article. It was far more damaging. It spoke of a breach of fiduciary duty, misuse of corporate funds, and an emergency board meeting. His reputation as a visionary CEO was being systematically dismantled and replaced with the image of a reckless, sleazy liability. The walls were closing in. The resort was no longer a sanctuary, it was a prison. The staff who had once been obsequious now looked at him with a mixture of pity and contempt. Their whispers followed him as he paced the boardwalk, his phone uselessly in his hand. He tried calling his COO, Richard, again. This time, Richard answered. "Seb, what the hell is going on?" Richard's voice was panicked. "The board has moved the meeting up to tonight. They're citing the morals clause in your employment contract. They're talking about suspension. Sebastian pending an internal investigation. They can't do that." Sebastian yelled into the phone. "They can. And they are." Richard shot back. "Arthur Vance is leading the charge. And he has a proxy vote from Catherine. She's still a significant shareholder, Seb. Combined with Arthur's stake, they have enough to force you out. Your assets are frozen. The company's reputation is in the toilet, and you're on the other side of the world. What do you want me to do?" The line went silent for a moment. The tropical breeze felt cold against Sebastian's skin. He was beaten. He knew it. He walked back to the suite. Chloe was frantically packing her bags, tears streaming down her face. "I have to get out of here," she sobbed. "My agent just dropped me. My sponsors are pulling their contracts. You've ruined me." Sebastian looked at her, a strange, chilling clarity settling over him. Catherine hadn't just come for him. She had come for his entire world. She had targeted his money, his company, his reputation, and even his mistress. It was a scorched earth strategy. It was total war. "There are no flights out until morning," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "We're stuck here. Together." The sun had set, completely plunging their gilded prison into darkness, broken only by the cold, distant light of the stars. It was the longest night of Sebastian Croft's life. The Maldivian night was long and suffocating. Sleep was an impossibility. Every creak of the bungalow, every gentle lap of the waves against the pylons, sounded like a footstep, a judgment. Sebastian sat in the darkness of the deck, the legal papers a pale rectangle on the table in the moonlight. He felt a profound, disorienting sense of powerlessness. For 2 decades, his entire identity had been built on his ability to control outcomes, to bend the world to his will through sheer force of ambition and capital. Now he was a king, with no kingdom, no subjects, and no currency. Chloe had locked herself in the bedroom, her occasional sobs the only other sound. Their shared fantasy had curdled into a mutual prison sentence. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that their relationship was over. What existed between them now was just the shared wreckage of their choices. Around 3 a.m. his phone lit up. It was a text from an unknown number. "You don't know the whole story. She's not who you think she is." Sebastian stared at the message. A paranoid thought flared. Was this Catherine playing more mind games? Or was it someone else? He texted back a single blunt question. "Who is this?" The reply came almost instantly. "Someone who knows what she's capable of. Check the prenup. The fiduciary duty clause. It wasn't about protecting the company. It was about controlling it. The fiduciary duty clause." He vaguely remembered it. Diana Sterling had introduced it during the negotiations years ago. At the time, Bill Peterson had dismissed it as unconventional, but largely harmless a formality to appease Catherine's family. It seemed absurd that his personal conduct could have corporate ramifications. His ego had been too large, his belief in his own untouchability too absolute to see the danger. He'd seen Catherine as a classic, passive, old-money wife, not a shrewd strategist. It was the single greatest miscalculation of his life. He spent the next hour in a frantic, desperate spiral of thought, replaying every interaction, every board meeting, every conversation with Catherine over the past year. He had seen her as quiet, withdrawn, perhaps depressed about the pregnancy. He had interpreted her silence as acquiescence. Now he saw it for what it was: observation, reconnaissance. She hadn't been sad. She had been gathering intelligence. A new, even more terrifying thought began to form in his mind: the timing of it all. His biggest corporate triumph, the deal that cemented his legacy, was announced just yesterday. And today, Catherine had struck. Why now? Why not a month ago? Why wait until the company's valuation was at its absolute peak? Because a larger valuation meant her potential claim was worth more. Infinitely more. This wasn't a crime of passion. This wasn't the reactive lashing out of a heartbroken wife. This was a corporate takeover, executed with the precision of a hostile acquisition disguised as a marital dispute. The first rays of dawn began to slice across the horizon, painting the sky in pale, sickly shades of grey and pink. The door to the bedroom creaked open. Chloe emerged, her eyes red and swollen, her face stripped of its usual glamorous makeup. She looked young and lost. She was holding her purse. My flight is at 11 a.m., she said, her voice brittle. I used the last of my savings to book a one-way ticket to Los Angeles. Economy, she said the last word as if it were a disease. Sebastian just nodded a grim emptiness inside him. Good luck. I need to ask you something. Seb, she said, her tone shifting. It was no longer hysterical, but cold and businesslike. Before I go, I need a safety net. This has destroyed my career. People think I'm a home wrecker, a gold digger. I have nothing. Chloe, he said flatly. You saw the papers. I'm broke. I'm not talking about your money now, she said, stepping closer. I'm talking about your future money. After the divorce, you'll rebuild. Men like you always do. I want a settlement, something to keep me quiet. Sebastian stared at her. Quiet about what? The truth is already on the front page of every gossip site on the planet. Chloe's expression hardened. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small, discreet audio recorder. The kind journalists use. She pressed a button. His own voice filled the room, slick and confident. Don't worry about Catherine, darling. The prenup is ironclad. The company is all mine. She gets the penthouse and a handsome allowance, and that's it. She's taken care of, but she'll never touch InnovateX. He remembered the conversation. It was from their trip to St. Bart's on the yacht. He'd been bragging, reassuring Chloe that their future was secure. She clicked it off. I have hours of this, Seb. Hours of you talking about the company, about the board members calling them idiots, about how you were planning to leverage the New Deal to push Arthur Vance out, about your creative accounting to fund us. The blood drained from Sebastian's face. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, it was almost poetic. His wife had outmaneuvered him in the boardroom, and his mistress had been playing him in the bedroom. He was surrounded. You were recording me. He whispered the words, tasting like ash. It was an insurance policy. She said, her voice unapologetic. I'm not stupid, Sebastian. I knew what I was. But I wasn't going to be a disposable toy. Now these recordings are either my retirement fund or they're Catherine's Exhibit B, your choice. He finally understood. This was the checkmate. Catherine's legal attack was the primary assault, a blitzkrieg that had broken his defenses. Chloe's betrayal was the final, devastating blow, ensuring there was nothing left to salvage. He had been outplayed on every conceivable level by the two women he thought he controlled completely. He looked at Chloe, at her cold, determined eyes, and he started to laugh. It wasn't a sound of mirth. It was the sound of a man breaking the horrifying, unhinged laughter of someone who has just realized the entire game was rigged against him from the start, and he was the only one who didn't know the rules. He had walked into paradise a king, and would be leaving a fool stripped of his crown, his fortune and his dignity, haunted by the echoes of his own arrogance. The emergency board meeting for InnovateX was not held in the company's gleaming, futuristic boardroom. At Arthur Vance's insistence, it was convened in the old-world wood-paneled conference room of his private equity firm, a space that smelled of leather and old money. The message was clear. This was not business as usual. This was a course correction. Arthur, a man in his late 60s with a mane of white hair and the piercing gaze of a hawk, sat at the head of the table. The other board members, a collection of venture capitalists and industry veterans, looked grim. There was an empty chair where Sebastian was supposed to be. In his place on a large screen at the end of the room was the impassive face of Diana Sterling, attending via video conference. As you all know, we are here under extraordinary, and deeply unfortunate circumstances. Arthur began, his voice a low rumble. Our CEO, Mr. Croft, has become embroiled in a public scandal that not only damages his personal reputation, but directly implicates the financial integrity of this company. He gestured to an aide who began distributing a slim folder to each member. This packet contains excerpts from the legal petition filed by Catherine Croft. I want to draw your attention to Exhibit C financial records, showing the transfer of over $2 million in the last fiscal year from corporate accounts to shell entities and personal credit cards expenditures which were used to finance a lifestyle completely unrelated to the business of Innovate X. A murmur went through the room. They had all read the headlines, but seeing the cold, hard numbers was different. This wasn't just an affair. It was embezzlement, thinly disguised. The fiduciary duty clause in Mr. Croft's marital agreement, which is tied to his employment contract, gives us unambiguous grounds for action. Arthur continued. His behavior has been reckless, and it has exposed this company to significant legal and financial risk. The market has already reacted. Our stock is down 12% in pre-market trading. We must act decisively to stop the bleeding and restore confidence. One of the board members, a tech investor named Robert Chen, spoke up. What is the proposed action? Arthur, I propose a vote of no confidence, Arthur said, his eyes sweeping the room. Effective immediately, we suspend Sebastian Croft from all duties as CEO and chairman of the board, pending a full independent forensic audit of the company's finances. I further propose we install an interim CEO to guide the company through this transition. The question hung in the air. Who could possibly step into such a role at a moment's notice? Who had the knowledge, the trust of the major shareholders, and the motivation to clean up the mess? As if on cue, Diana Sterling's voice filled the room from the screen. Gentlemen, on behalf of my client, Catherine Croft, who, as you know, retains a 16% stake in InnovateX, we would like to put forward a name for consideration as interim CEO. The room fell silent. They all knew Catherine had the social grace and the family name, but no one had ever considered her a corporate player. My client. Diana continued, her voice cutting through their assumptions. Has a degree in economics from Wharton. Before her marriage, she worked as a financial analyst at Goldman Sachs. For the past decade, she has not just been a passive spouse, she has been an active, albeit silent, partner in this company's journey. She helped secure the initial funding. She has reviewed every quarterly report. She understands the company's finances, its strengths, and, as has become painfully clear, its vulnerabilities better than anyone. Arthur Vance nodded slowly, revealing the final piece of the meticulously planned strategy. Catherine has my full support and my proxy. Combined, her stake and mine represent a controlling interest. She is not just a candidate. She is the only logical choice to signal to the market that the era of reckless governance is over, and a new era of stability and integrity has begun. It was a masterstroke. A coup. The board members looked at each other, the realization dawning on them. They weren't just being asked, they were being told. Sebastian hadn't just been fired by his wife. He was being replaced by her. Furthermore, Diana added, delivering the coup de grace, my client has already been in contact with several key figures at Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. She is prepared to give an exclusive interview this afternoon, outlining her vision for the future of Innovate X. A vision of transparency, sustainable growth, and a renewed focus on our core mission, free from the distractions and liabilities of the previous leadership. She was not just seizing control. She was already steering the narrative, turning a story of sordid scandal into one of corporate responsibility and female empowerment. She was transforming herself from the wronged wife into the company's savior. The vote was a formality, unanimous. Sebastian Croft was officially out. Catherine Croft was in. Hours later, Catherine sat in the same boardroom where her victory had been solidified. She wore a different dress now, a powerful, dark grey one. A makeup artist had just finished giving her a look that was strong and camera-ready. Her phone rang. It was an unknown number, but she knew who it was. She answered. Catherine Sebastian's voice was a ghost, thin and broken, stripped of all its commanding bravado. He was calling from a borrowed phone at the mail's airport. "Sebastian?" She replied, her voice perfectly level, betraying no emotion. Why he asked the single word loaded with a universe of confusion and pain. Was it just about the money to take the company? Catherine paused, looking out the window at the city she was about to conquer. "You misunderstand, Sebastian," she said, her voice dropping to a cool, quiet intensity. "You always did. You thought the company was yours. You thought the money was yours. You thought I was yours. You were wrong. The company was our partnership. The money was our future, and I am no one's property." She continued. "You didn't just cheat on me. You gambled with our child's legacy. You took the foundations we built together and used them to construct a cheap, sordid fantasy for yourself. I didn't take the company from you, Sebastian. I am simply taking it back." She could hear his ragged breathing on the other end of the line. There was nothing he could say. No argument he could make. A final piece of advice, she said, her voice chillingly calm. "I would suggest you find a very good lawyer. Not a corporate yes man like Bill, but a real criminal defense attorney. Because when my auditors are finished, infidelity will be the very least of your legal problems." With that, she ended the call. She placed the phone on the table, took a deep breath, and stood up. The television crew was waiting for her in the next room. A new chapter was beginning. Her chapter. She had not only survived the betrayal, she had used it as a catalyst to claim a power Sebastian never even knew she possessed. The king was deposed. Long live the queen. The journey home was a 20-hour exercise in humiliation, stripped of his private jet. Sebastian Croft, the titan of tech, was now just another passenger on a commercial flight. He was wedged into a middle seat in premium economy, the best a shell-shocked Richard had been able to book, with his own credit card between a snoring salesman and a woman who kept glancing at him, her eyes wide with recognition from the news articles on her phone. The flight attendants, trained to be discreet, nonetheless gave him a wide berth, their professional smiles strained. Every moment was a reminder of his fall from grace. The recycled air, the mediocre food served in a plastic tray, the indignity of waiting in line for the lavatory. It was a foreign planet, and he was its most unwelcome visitor. Touching down at JFK was even worse. As he emerged into the arrivals hall, a pack of paparazzi descended upon him like vultures. Flashes exploded in his face, blinding him. Microphones were shoved towards his mouth. "Mr. Croft, is it true you embezzled company funds? Sebastian, what do you have to say to your wife? How does it feel to lose your company?" He flinched, shielding his face with his arm, and pushed through the scrum, his heart hammering against his ribs. He had once commanded stages in front of thousands, his every word treated as prophecy. Now he was prey, and the sound of the baying pack was the new soundtrack to his life. He finally spotted the car, His lawyer had sent a drab black sedan, not his usual chauffeured Maybach, and threw himself into the back, gasping for air as it sped away from the curb. His new lawyer's office was not on Park Avenue. It was in a nondescript building downtown with scuffed floors and the faint smell of stale coffee. Frank Gallo was not like the polished, deferential attorneys Sebastian was used to. He was a bull of a man with a weary face and hands like shovels, a specialist in white-collar criminal defense. He didn't offer Sebastian a drink. He just gestured to a worn leather chair. "Let's not waste time." Frank began, his voice a gravelly monotone. He slid a copy of Catherine's petition across the desk. "This divorce filing. This is a work of art. I've seen mafia indictments written with less precision. Your wife isn't just divorcing you, Mr. Croft. She's gutting you. I'll fight it." Sebastian said the words, sounding hollow even to himself. Frank leaned back, a humorless smirk on his lips. "Fight it with what your assets are frozen. Your reputation is radioactive. And that's just the civil suit. The real problem is the mountain of evidence she's handed the district attorney on a silver platter. The wire transfers to the shell company. The abuse of the corporate expense accounts. These aren't just grounds for divorce. They're potential felonies. Wire fraud. Embezzlement. Securities fraud, if they can prove you misled the board and investors about the company's financial health to fund your personal life." He paused, letting the words sink in. "And I got a call this morning from your wife's counsel. It seems your former girlfriend, Ms. Summers, provided them with hours of audio recordings of you bragging about cooking the books and hiding assets. She traded them for a modest settlement, and more importantly, immunity from prosecution as an accomplice." Sebastian felt the last bit of air leave his lungs. Chloe. The final perfect betrayal. He was utterly, comprehensively ruined. "So what do I do?" he whispered. "You stop thinking like a CEO and start thinking like a defendant," Frank said bluntly. "Our goal is no longer to win. Our goal is damage control. We need to negotiate a global settlement with your wife and a plea deal with the DA. The best-case scenario I can see for you right now, Mr. Croft, is that you avoid wearing an orange jumpsuit. While Sebastian was confronting the ashes of his empire, Catherine was stepping into its throne. She arrived at the Innovate X headquarters at 8 a.m. sharp. The cavernous, sun-drenched lobby, with its famous living wall and minimalist furniture, fell silent as she walked in. Employees paused, looking up from their phones and conversations, their expressions a mixture of awe, fear, and intense curiosity. She was no longer just the CEO's wife. She was a legend, whispered about on Slack channels, the woman who had executed a flawless corporate coup from her living room. Dressed in a simple but impeccably tailored black dress, she projected an aura of serene authority. She didn't march. She glided, nodding politely to the stunned security guard as she badged herself in. Arthur Vance and the rest of the board were waiting to escort her. Her first act was to call an all-hands meeting in the main atrium. Standing on the tiered steps with the entire New York office gathered before her, she looked out at the faces of the people whose futures now rested in her hands. "Good morning," she began, her voice calm and clear, amplified by the building's acoustics. There were no notes. "I know the past 48 hours have been a time of uncertainty and confusion for all of you. You have read the headlines and you have heard the rumors. I am here to provide clarity, not commentary." She let that sink in. Innovate X is more than just one person. It is a collective of the most brilliant, dedicated, and creative minds in the industry. It is you. For too long, the focus of this company has strayed from its core mission. We became a story about valuation and ego, not innovation and value. That ends today. Effective immediately, she announced, I have commissioned a top-tier independent firm to conduct a complete forensic audit of our finances. The results will be made transparent to the board and, where appropriate, to all of you. We are establishing a new empowered ethics and governance committee. We will rebuild trust from the ground up with our partners, our investors, and with each other. She spoke for 10 more minutes, laying out a vision that was the antithesis of Sebastian's, a future built on collaboration, sustainability, and ethical leadership. She didn't mention his name once. She didn't have to. The entire speech was an indictment of his reign and a promise of a new world. When she finished, there was a moment of stunned silence, followed by a tentative then thunderous round of applause. It was a sound of relief, a sound of hope. Later that day, Catherine walked into the CEO's office on the top floor. It was a monument to Sebastian's ego, vast with panoramic views, a ridiculously oversized desk, and abstract art that cost a fortune. His personal effects had already been boxed up by an assistant. The only thing left was a faint scent of his cologne, a ghost in the machine. She walked not to the desk, but to the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city. Her city now. She placed a hand on her stomach, the life within her a steady, grounding presence. Her assistant entered quietly and placed a tablet on the desk. Ms. Croft, the market just closed. The stock is up 7% since your address this morning. Forbes is calling you the stabilizer. Catherine allowed herself a small, private smile. She picked up the tablet, but instead of looking at the stock chart, she swiped to a different image she had saved there, a grainy, black-and-white sonogram. The first picture of her son. That was the only valuation that mattered. The room was no longer Sebastian's office. It was her son's legacy. And she would protect it with the same ruthless precision she had used to win it. And so Sebastian Croft's paradise vacation ended not with a private jet, but with a commercial flight in coach next to a crying baby. He returned not to a penthouse, but to a world of lawsuits, federal investigations, and public disgrace. The mistress who he thought was a prize turned out to be just another predator selling her recordings to Catherine's legal team for a tidy sum, securing her own future while burying his. Catherine Croft, once seen as the quiet woman behind the great man, proved to be the architect of his downfall and the master of her own destiny. She saved the company, gave birth to a healthy baby boy, and went on to run Innovate X with a level of integrity and success Sebastian could only have dreamed of. This story is a stark reminder that the deepest betrayals often come from underestimating the quietest person in the room. What do you think? Was Catherine's revenge a calculated masterpiece or a step too far? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story of betrayal and retribution as compelling as we did, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to True Betrayal Stories for more real-life dramas that are stranger than fiction.